gallery, her back straight, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Her gaze was fixed on the young sailor standing before the bench, a kid named Peterson who had gotten a speeding ticket he couldn't afford. Ella was here for him. The judge's words seemed to hang in the air, directed at her, yet feeling like they were from a different world entirely. The object in question rested against her simple red blouse. It was not a necklace. A pale blue ribbon dotted with 13 white stars held a 5-pointed star of gold, an anchor at its center surrounded by a laurel wreath. It was the Medal of Honor. Judge Harrington, a man whose portrait hung in the lobby and whose ego filled the room, peered down from his elevated throne of polished oak. He adjusted his glasses, his expression one of pure annoyance, as if swatting away a fly that had dared to buzz too close to his head. "Ma'am, did you hear me?" He pressed, his gavel tapping lightly, a sound like a woodpecker on a dead tree. "The bailiff will assist you if necessary." The bailiff, a burly man with a kind, tired face, shifted his weight. He looked from the judge's imperious scowl to the quiet woman in the gallery. He took a half-step forward and stopped. Something about her stillness, her utter lack of fear or defiance, gave him pause. He could see the intricate detail on the medal now, the way it caught the flat fluorescent light. It felt heavy, important. "Your Honor," Ella said, her voice clear and steady, not loud but carrying to every corner of the silent room. "It is authorized." The simplicity of her statement seemed to enrage the judge further. It was a challenge not to his rule, but to his knowledge. "Authorized by whom? I am the authority in this courtroom, and I say it is not. This is not a parade ground. It is a place of law. Now take it off, or I will have you removed and held in contempt." The threat was clear. The room grew colder. The young sailor, Peterson, glanced back at her, his face a mask of panic. He knew who she was, what she had done for him, and so many others at the local Veterans Center. He opened his mouth to speak, but Ella gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head. This was not his fight. The judge continued his monologue, his voice rising with self-righteous indignation. "The dignity of this court is paramount. We cannot have citizens appearing as if they are attending a costume party, wearing whatever trinkets they see fit. It undermines the very fabric of the proceedings." Trinket. The word landed with a dull thud. The bailiff began to walk toward her, his steps slow and reluctant. He was a professional, a man who followed orders, but every instinct screamed at him that this was wrong. He could see the other people in the gallery, a few family members for other cases, a couple of lawyers waiting their turn, all staring, rapt. The air was thick with a tension he had never felt in this room. It wasn't the tension of a verdict, it was the tension of a desecration about to happen. Ella's composure remained absolute. She did not prepare to argue or resist. Her focus was inward, her breathing slow and measured, a discipline honed in places far less forgiving than this carpeted air-conditioned chamber. She had faced down men with rifles and rocket launchers, men whose eyes held a burning, murderous hate. The petty tyranny of this judge was nothing. It was just disappointing. It was a failure of the system she had sworn and bled to protect. "Bailiff," the judge commanded, his voice sharp now, cracking like a whip. "Remove the contraband and escort the woman from my courtroom. Her presence is a disruption." Contraband. The word was an absurdity. Ella's gaze drifted to the American flag standing tall beside the judge's bench. She remembered saluting that flag on dusty forward operating bases, on the gray steel decks of warships, and in the quiet reverence of a memorial service. The judge saw a piece of cloth. She saw a promise. He saw a piece of metal on a ribbon. She felt the weight of the lives it represented. The bailiff was now standing in her aisle. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low, almost an apology. "Please, don't make this difficult." Ella finally turned her eyes from the flag and met his. She saw the conflict there, the shame. She gave him a small, sad smile. "Just doing your job, I understand." She made no move to stand, nor to remove the medal. She would not participate in its dishonor. If they were to take it, they would have to do it themselves. She would force them to own the fullness of their actions. The judge, seeing her placid resistance as the ultimate act of defiance, slammed his gavel down. The sound was a cannon shot in the silent room. "I find you in contempt of court. I am ordering you detained." As the bailiff reached for her arm, the judge leaned forward, his face flushed with victory and rage. "That gaudy necklace of yours will be held as evidence of your contempt." Gaudy necklace. The phrase was a spark hitting dry tinder. For a fraction of a second, the courtroom dissolved around Ella. The stale, recycled air was replaced by the thick, metallic scent of blood and cordite. The judge's droning voice became the high-pitched whine of incoming mortar fire. The pressure of the blue ribbon on the back of her neck was no longer silk, but the rough, biting canvas of a trauma bag strap, digging into her skin as she low-crawled through shattered concrete and sand. She could feel the phantom weight on her back, not a pack but a body. A young Marine, a lance corporal from Ohio who had been telling jokes just an hour before. She remembered the frantic, desperate pressure of her hands packing his wounds, the helicopter's rotor wash kicking up a blinding storm of dust, the rhythmic shouting of call signs and casualty reports over the radio. The medal wasn't a memory of victory. It was a scar. It was a testament to the cost of a single afternoon in the Helmand River Valley, a reminder of the 4 men who came home under a flag because of her, and the 2 who didn't, despite everything she had done. The judge saw a decoration. She saw ghosts. At his small desk off to the side, the court clerk David felt a cold sweat bead on his forehead. His fingers had frozen over the keyboard. He was 24 years old, a Marine Corps veteran who'd done a 4-year enlistment as a radio operator. He'd spent his time at a quiet embassy, never seeing combat, but he had been trained to recognize things. He knew his ranks and ribbons. He knew the difference between a unit citation and a personal award, and he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone what that pale blue ribbon meant. He had seen it in books. He had heard the citations read aloud by drill instructors until the words were burned into his memory. He'd seen the grainy photos of presidents placing that simple, sacred object around the necks of heroes, and he was watching a pompous, ignorant judge order a bailiff to rip it from a woman's neck. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was wrong. This was a violation of something profound. The judge's order to detain her was the final straw. David's training, his deeply ingrained sense of order and respect for the chain of command, was screaming at him. There was a higher authority than Judge Harrington, and it was being defiled. While the bailiff hesitated, his hand hovering over Ella's shoulder, David's hands moved under his desk with a furtive, desperate speed. He pulled out his personal cell phone. His thumb flew across the screen, his mind racing through his contacts. Who do you call when the system is breaking itself? He didn't have a number for the Pentagon, but he had the number for the man who had been his company's master gunnery sergeant back in the Corps, a man now stationed as the senior enlisted advisor at the nearby naval base Coronado. It was a long shot, a breach of every protocol he could think of, but he didn't care. He pressed the call button and lifted the phone to his ear, cupping his hand over his mouth and turning away from the bench. "Master Guns, it's David Cho," he whispered, his voice tight with adrenaline. "Sorry to call you like this, but you're not going to believe what's happening." The phone on the other end was silent for a moment. "Cho, what's going on? You sound spooked. I'm at the county courthouse. There's a woman here, a veteran. The judge is holding her in contempt." "For what?" David took a shaky breath. "She's wearing the Medal of Honor. Judge Harrington keeps calling it a necklace. He just ordered the bailiff to confiscate it." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute, a void of disbelief and fury. When the master gunnery sergeant finally spoke, his voice had lost all its earlier casualness. It was flint. It was steel. "Give me the address and the courtroom number." "Now." David rattled off the information. "Keep your head down, Cho. We're on our way." The line went dead. David slid the phone back into his pocket, his heart still pounding. He looked up at Ella Anderson. He had just lit a fuse. He just prayed the cavalry would arrive in time. The call from Master Gunnery Sergeant Reyes lit up the command decks at Naval Base Coronado like a wildfire. A Master Guns with 28 years of service doesn't make frantic calls without cause. He didn't bother with the normal chain of command. He strode directly from his office to the base commander's chief of staff, a Navy captain who was in the middle of a logistics briefing. Reyes interrupted, a breach of protocol so severe it stopped the meeting cold. "Captain, we have a problem," Reyes said, his voice a low growl. "A Medal of Honor recipient is being held in contempt by a civilian judge downtown. He's trying to take her medal." The captain's face went pale. He held up a hand to the presenter. "Excuse me." He followed Reyes into the passageway. "Are you certain?" "Clerk on the scene is one of my former Marines." "He's certain." The gears of the institution began to turn with breathtaking speed. The captain made a call not down but up, straight to the office of the commander, U.S. Pacific Fleet. The 4-star Admiral's aide, a young but sharp lieutenant commander, took the call. Her eyes widened as she listened. She scribbled a note on a pad, tore it off, and without a word of apology walked into the Admiral's private conference room where he was meeting with a foreign naval delegation. She placed the note face down on the polished mahogany in front of Admiral Thompson. He gave her a look of sharp annoyance before glancing down. He read the note. Once, twice. The friendly diplomatic warmth vanished from his face, replaced by a glacial calm that his staff knew meant trouble. The note was simple: MCPO Ella Anderson, County Courthouse, Courtroom 4B. Judge ordering medal confiscated. Admiral Thompson stood up abruptly. "Gentlemen, you must forgive me," he said to the stunned delegates. "A matter of extreme national importance has just arisen. We will have to reschedule." He strode out of the room, his aide falling in step beside him. "Get me her file, now," he commanded. "And get my car. Tell the base commander and Master Chief Reyes to meet me at the courthouse. Full dress uniform." In the Admiral's office, Ella Anderson's service record flashed onto a large monitor. The aide gasped. The screen was a constellation of heroism: Navy Cross, Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and at the very top the official citation for the Medal of Honor, awarded for actions above and beyond the call of duty. Her official photograph showed a young woman with tired, knowing eyes, a Master Chief's anchor on her collar. Admiral Thompson stared at the photo. He knew that face. He had been the battle group commander offshore when her unit was hit. He had read the after-action reports, the raw, unbelievable accounts of her courage. He had signed the initial recommendation for her award himself. This was not an abstract hero. This was one of his own. Back in Courtroom 4B, Judge Harrington was savoring his power. The bailiff, trapped between a direct order and a profound sense of wrongness, had placed a hand gently on Ella's arm. "Ma'am, you have to come with me," he pleaded quietly. "This is the last time I will say it," the judge boomed, pointing a finger at her. "You will surrender that unauthorized decoration as evidence of your contempt for the lawful order of this court. Failure to do so will result in additional charges. You are willfully obstructing justice." He was so consumed by his own authority, so blinded by the perceived slight to his office, that he had pushed past the point of no return. He was no longer just a judge enforcing decorum. He was a man demanding a hero surrender her honor. To confiscate the medal was not just to take a piece of metal. It was an attempt to nullify the sacrifice it represented. The young sailor Peterson finally broke his silence. "Your Honor, stop. You don't know who she is." "Silence," the judge roared, banging his gavel again. "One more outburst and I'll have you joining her in a cell." It was at that precise moment that the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. They didn't creak. They opened with a solid, definitive thud that commanded the attention of everyone present. Framed in the doorway stood Admiral Thompson. 4 silver stars glittered on the collar of his pristine service dress, white uniform. On one side stood the base commander, a 2-star rear admiral. On the other stood Master Gunnery Sergeant Reyes, his Marine Corps dress blues a slash of color and rigid formality. Behind them, a silent phalanx of other officers and senior enlisted personnel, including a female captain and a command master chief, filled the entrance. They didn't storm in, they walked. Their steps were measured, their black dress shoes making a soft, rhythmic cadence on the tiled floor. The sound was more intimidating than a shout. It was the sound of purpose. It was the sound of an institution arriving to protect its own. The entire courtroom froze. The judge's mouth hung open, his words dying in his throat. The bailiff snatched his hand back from Ella's arm as if he'd been burned. Every head turned to stare at the silent, imposing procession moving down the center aisle. Admiral Thompson's eyes, a piercing blue, scanned nothing else in the room. He did not look at the flag, the bench, or the cowering judge. His gaze was locked on the unassuming woman in the 3rd row. He walked right past the bar separating the gallery from the court and stopped directly in front of her. The room was so quiet that the hum of the overhead lights sounded like a roar. Ella looked up and met the Admiral's eyes. A flicker of recognition passed between them. Then Admiral Thompson did something that shattered every remaining shred of Judge Harrington's authority. He brought his heels together with an audible click. He raised his right hand in a salute so sharp, so precise, it seemed to cut the air. An admiral, a 4-star officer saluting a retired enlisted woman. It was the ultimate gesture of respect, a custom reserved almost exclusively for one award. He held the salute for a long, silent moment before crisply dropping his hand. "Master Chief Petty Officer Anderson," the admiral said, his voice a calm, resonant baritone that carried more power than the judge's angry shouts ever could. "It is an honor to see you again." He then turned his head slightly, not fully facing the judge but ensuring he was heard. For the edification of the court, he began, his voice taking on a formal, declamatory tone. "This is Master Chief Hospital Corpsman Ella Anderson, United States Navy, retired. The decoration she is wearing is the Medal of Honor, awarded to her for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty." The admiral took a step to the side so he could see both Ella and the bench. On October 17, 2012, during an ambush in the Helmand River Valley, Afghanistan, Then Chief Petty Officer Anderson's platoon was pinned down by overwhelming enemy machine gun and RPG fire. With 3 Marines critically wounded in the open, she left her covered position without hesitation and ran directly into the kill zone. The crowd was mesmerized. The lawyers, the clerks, the other citizens, everyone was listening, picturing the scene. The court clerk David felt tears welling in his eyes. She shielded the first Marine with her own body while applying a tourniquet to his leg. The Admiral continued, his voice unwavering. She was wounded by shrapnel in the process. Ignoring her own injuries, she dragged that Marine to cover before running back into the fire to retrieve the second. While treating him, she engaged the enemy with her sidearm, suppressing a machine gun nest long enough for her team to regroup. She ran back a third time for the third man, and was wounded again, this time by a gunshot to the shoulder. Despite her wounds, she stabilized all 3 critical casualties and refused evacuation for herself until every one of her wounded comrades was safely on a helicopter. Her actions are directly credited with saving the lives of 4 United States Marines. He paused, letting the weight of the story settle into the room's stunned silence. The judge's face had gone from flushed red to a pasty, sickly white. The gavel lay forgotten on his desk. "That trinket," the Admiral said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level as he finally turned to face the judge directly, "is the highest honor our nation can bestow upon a service member. Its wear is not only authorized, it is encouraged by federal law. A law which, I might add, makes any unauthorized attempt to wear or purchase this medal a federal crime. Your order to confiscate it was not only an insult of the highest order, it was an order to commit an unlawful act." The rebuke was complete. The public humiliation of Judge Harrington was a palpable thing. He shrank behind his bench, a small man in a big chair. It was Ella who spoke next. She slowly rose to her feet, wincing slightly from an old ache in her shoulder. She looked not at the Admiral but at the judge. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a deep, weary sadness. "Your Honor," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I respect the rules of this courtroom. I respect the law. Standards are important. I spent 30 years of my life enforcing them, but standards must be applied with wisdom and understanding. They should not be used as a weapon of ignorance." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Don't soften standards. Just be better at recognizing them when they're right in front of you." Her simple, graceful lesson was more devastating than the Admiral's fury. It wasn't a lecture, it was a piece of wisdom from someone who had earned the right to give it. As she finished speaking, another image flashed in her mind, brief and vivid. Not the dust and chaos of battle, but the hushed, reverent quiet of the Oval Office. She saw the President of the United States, his face etched with solemn respect, as he fastened the blue ribbon around her neck. She remembered the weight of it then, how it felt both impossibly heavy and as light as a feather. She remembered the words of the official citation being read, echoing in the silent, historic room. That moment, the pinnacle of national gratitude, felt a universe away from this shabby, misbegotten conflict in a local courtroom. The contrast was a final, silent testament to the chasm between her world and the judge's. The fallout was immediate and absolute. Judge Harrington, looking like a ghost, stammered a string of apologies. He dismissed the contempt charge against Ella. He dismissed the speeding ticket against the young sailor, Peterson, with a wave of his trembling hand. The proceedings for the day were abruptly adjourned. Admiral Thompson and his entourage